One of the things that you need to be able to do in this math course and in all the math courses is to be able to change quickly from decimals to fractions and also from fractions to decimals. Let me just talk very quickly about the decimals to fractions, which is by far the easiest. As long as you know the decimal place value names, it's very easy to switch from a decimal to a fraction. For instance, if you are given something like this, 0.3, you just say that is 3/10. So I could write it as the fraction 3/10. If I'm giving something like 0.58, that is 58 hundredths would be the way to say that, so I could write 58 hundredths. Sometimes you might be given something like 4.125. Now I have a mixed number, and when I change that, it would be 4 and 125 thousandths. So once again, as long as you know the place value names, it's very easy to change from decimals into fractions. Changing from fractions to decimals is also easy, as long as the denominator is a power of 10. For instance, 7/10 would just be 0.7. If I had 3 hundredths, it would just be 0.03. If I had 17 10,000ths written as a decimal, it would be 0.0017 because I've come out to 10,000ths place and I have the number 17. But notice in each one of these cases, the denominator is a power of 10, which does make it easy to change from a fraction to a decimal. So what happens when the denominator is not a power of 10, for instance 3/4? Well, this is where most people might grab a calculator, although 3/4 is a decimal equivalent that most people do probably know. It's equal to 75 hundredths. Let me just illustrate very quickly why that is. If I have the fraction 3/4, I could change that into hundredths by multiplying by 25 25ths. Remember, 25 25ths is equal to 1. So when I do that, I get 75 hundredths. In effect, what I've done is I've given an equivalent fraction for that 3/4, and I've changed that fourths into hundredths, which does make it easier. As I said, if you didn't know, though, that 3/4 was equal to 0.75, you could just go through and grab a calculator. So on a calculator, there are several things you can do. Certainly you could go through. Remember, in a fraction, the bar means division. So on a calculator, probably the easiest thing is just to go 3 divided by 4, and it would give you 0.75 for an answer. There are also calculators where you can punch in the fraction 3/4, hit a button that says F to D, which means it's going to change it from a fraction to a decimal or from a decimal to a fraction, whichever one, and also give you the answer. I'd like you to grab your calculator, if you would, for this next idea. There are 2 different types of decimals that you do need to be aware of, and the first type is known as terminating decimals. If you were given the fraction 2/5, and you wanted to use your calculator to figure out what that was as a decimal, you would go 2 divided by 5, and it would give you an answer of 0.4. If you did 19 20ths and put that into your calculator, you should get an answer of 0.95. If we did 7/5, 7/5, it's going to give us an answer, 7 divided by 5, of 1.4. All of these types of decimals are known as terminating decimals, terminating meaning ending, because they are stopping at a particular point. But let's go through and put in the fraction 1/3 and change that into a decimal. If you change that into a decimal on your calculator, it's going to give you an answer something similar to 0.333333, and that 3 just continues. And how many places that 3 continues will be dependent upon your calculator. This is known as a repeating decimal because it's going to continue going on forever and ever. And the reason for that is because if you did long division, remember 1/3 means 1 divided by 3. If I went through and did that long division wise, I would be asking myself, how many times does 3 go into 10? It goes in there 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. Subtract, I get 1, and I could bring down another 0. 3 goes into 10 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. Subtract 1, I bring down another 0. You would see that this continues and goes on forever and ever and does not stop. So we call that a repeating decimal. So rather than writing all these 3's, there's another way to write this. If I have the fraction 1/3, instead I would write 0.3 with a line over the 3, and that means that that 3 just repeats. I'd like you to put in the fraction 2/3 and change that to a decimal using your calculator. And depending upon your calculator, some calculators may give this for an answer, 0.666666666, but then the last number is a 7, and some calculators may just have 6's all the way across. So what is the answer to 2/3? Well, 2/3 is this particular answer. It really is 0.6 with a line over the 6. So the question is, why do some calculators, and my calculator just did this, why do they have a 7 at the very end rather than that 6? Well, you need to be able to recognize that this is the answer right here to 2/3. It's 0.6 with a line over the 6. The reason that my calculator and perhaps your calculator gave a 7 at the very end is because it's programmed to round off to the next digit. It knew that there was a 6 in this next digit right here, so it rounded off the last digit it had and gave a 7. So if it is a repeating decimal, you just need to make sure that you know, if you change it from a fraction to a decimal, what exactly that means and how your calculator is interpreting it. If you would, punch 36/99 into your calculator and see what it gives for an answer. In this particular case, your calculator is going to give 0.363636. And now we have a repeating decimal in which 2 of the digits are repeating. So you would need to be writing it as 0.36 with a line over both the 3 and the 6. If you had the fraction 5/6, 5/6 on your calculator would say 0.8333, and the 3 is repeating. So if I wanted to write that, I would say the answer is 0.83 with a line over the 3. There are even some that are very long. For instance, punch 2/7 into your calculator for a moment. If you punch 2/7 into your calculator, it's going to give you 0.285714, 2, or perhaps it's a 3. I'm not sure, once again, how many digits your calculator goes out to, but this is a repeating decimal, and it's repeating with 285714. So the sevenths are an interesting fraction. If you ever have a 7 in the denominator, it is going to give you a very long repeating decimal. I have 6 different numbers listed here, and to finish off this video, what I would like you to do is, after seeing these, I'd like you to go through, turn this off, and put these numbers in order, please, from smallest to greatest, and then start this back up again. Okay, hopefully you have had time to go through and put these in order. Let me talk about how I would go through and do this. Some of these are written in fractions and some of these are written in decimals, and it would be much easier if they were all written in decimals. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I am going to rewrite any of my fractions into decimals. 0.6 with a line over it is what 2/3 is equal to. Here I have 0.65. The 3/5 is just 0.6 with no line over it. Then I have 0.619. 64/99 when I do it on a calculator is 0.646464. So I'm going to put 0.64 with a line over the 64. And then I have 0.66. So I need to take all these numbers, I need to put these numbers in order from smallest to greatest. All of them have a 6 in the tenths place. So the smallest number that I have is just 3/5 because it is just a 0.6 in the tenths place. So I can cross that one out. The next smallest number that I have is 0.619 because it has a 1 in the hundredths place. After that, I have numbers out in the hundredths place that have a 4, have a 5, have a 6, an understood 6 in the hundredths place, and have a 6 in the hundredths place. So my next number, my next smallest number is 64/99 because it has a 4 in the hundredths place. Following that, my next number would be 0.65 because it has a 5 in the hundredths place. After that, I have two numbers left over. 2/3, which is 0.66666 continuing, and just 0.66. Well, this particular number, 0.66, would really have a 0 in the thousandths place. So it is going to be the next number, 0.66, and then the greatest number that I have is 2/3. Being able to put these numbers in order from smallest to greatest, and certainly recognizing that 2/3 is larger than 0.66 is an important skill. As I mentioned at the beginning of this module, knowing the basics of decimals will greatly help you as you progress through the rest of this course. It would also be helpful if you memorized certain fraction to decimal equivalents that are used in everyday life, like the halves, thirds, fourths, fifths, sixths, and eighths. Rather than give you those equivalents here, I have them printed on a document that you can download from this module. I highly recommend that you spend time memorizing them, as knowing them will make your math life much easier. Before going on to the next video in this module, I would like you to complete a quick check on this video, which can be found next. In it, you will find 5 quick problems that can be used to check your understanding. I urge you to do as many of them as you can without a calculator, but feel free to use a calculator when needed. If you do well in the quick check, you are ready to watch the next video. If you have difficulty with it, you may want to review this video again, look at the different websites I have in the module to give more explanations, or contact me for additional help. Thank you.